A little bit of background about Carol and why someone from the food team is hosting her. So Carol's initial book, The Responsible Business, came out a little while back, and we adopted it into the framework within our global food program strategy. And we've been using her book and the strategy behind that for the last 2 years. And so I'm sure Carol will have some juicy tidbits to share about that. So it's super exciting to have her back here in sunny Mountain View. The Responsible Business Framework really identifies 5 windows through which businesses view their activities. And this is something that she'll speak to, but it's really interesting to kind of get it out there now to start thinking about it. The 5 areas or the 5 activities are the customers that you think about, the co-creators, which she'll talk through, the earth around being sustainable, something that Google is all about, the community in which we work and live, and then the last one being the investors, making sure we're making money and being profitable. So Carol has collaborated with Fortune 100 and entrepreneur CEOs for 4 decades in building the responsible business. That is, that is reimagined idea of success and how to get there with the benefit to all stakeholders. Carol authored a multi-award-winning book by the same name, which tells those stories. The new book, The Responsible Entrepreneur, in front of me here, just came out on July 7th this fall. She is the founder and faculty at the Responsible Entrepreneur Institute, intermittent lecturer at MIT, Sloan, Harvard Business, Michigan Ross, Toronto Rothman, and the University of Washington Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. She also blogs for CNBC, Stanford Social, Innovation Review, and many others. Carol plays with making and sharing food and thinking about the business of food and its place in communities and where she lives. It is my pleasure to introduce Carol Sanford, a member of our Food Innovation Lab and author of her latest book, The Responsible Entrepreneur. So with that, I give you Carol.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I thought I would start with a bit of a story and see if you can relate to this story. When I was very young, I can actually remember as early as 4 years old having a thought about, I wonder how much I could do with my life. Now, I didn't have those words for it, but I remember feeling like that there was something, if you set out to do it, you could make a big difference. Now, at that point, I have to tell you, what I was thinking about was rescuing the dogs that the dog catcher picked up. But as time went on, by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, I lived in, I had made a decision about the time I was 6 or 7 years old that a lot of my work should be about reversing racism. And part of that was because I grew up in the panhandle of Texas where it was rampant, and it was rampant in my family. So there are various paths I've followed through my life to try and do what I can with my life. And I have, in that process, become absolutely fascinated with cultures that make it possible for people to make a really big difference with their life, and for people who manage to rise to unbelievable challenge and accomplish great things even when they don't have a culture that supports them. How many of you felt like when you were young that you might want to do something big with your life? Did anybody of you had that thought? Yeah. So I find in many cultures, you know, you don't have all the words for it, right? But it's sort of there. I also, having been here hanging out with Googlers for a couple of years now through the Food Experience Innovation Lab with Scott and Mikhail Bacher and 100 other folks, have come to realize what a culture this is for people being able to actually realize and do something amazing with their life. But the question I have for you today, and what this book is about, this new book, is, are you fully taking advantage of it? And so today, instead of me just lecturing to you, which I find really boring, I'm going to offer you some stories, and I'm going to start with asking a question I'd like for you to use to think as we go along. And instead of you asking me questions like a Q&A, I'm going to ask you questions. And I'm going to stop and ask you to comment. Is that fair? And if you absolutely say, I'll probably call on you anyway, but you can try that. Because it's much more fun if we engage rather than just me telling you what I think, because I don't think I'm any bigger expert than you are at this. I've just lived it a little longer and met a lot more people potentially than you have. So I want to start with this question. If you were to think about the evolution of a healthier society, a healthier ecosystem, and you were to say personally, not what Google says, not what my unit or my work is about, but me personally, where do I think is the biggest, and using Google language, 10x place to leverage? If I were just going to take on something and I were really going to derive something I thought would create a much healthier ecosystem and a healthier society, what would I pick? What would I say is like the node or the point to intervene? That if I were going to put my life energy and I were going to make a big difference, that might be where I would put it. Do you have thoughts about the answer to that? Anybody have a thought about the answer to that? Where?
People.
People, in any specific thing you do with people?
So I was halfway right.
Yeah, this is a test. I should have told you.
Educating the young ones.
Educating the young ones. So you have a starting sense that, like, when they get older, it's sometimes really hard to change minds and grow people, but young. So I see several people shaking their head. Where else do people have a thought about, here's where I would start? Or here's where I might focus.
Access to information.
So why? Say a little more on what that would look like. You happen to be in a company that knows a bit about that, right? But where would you take it? Where would you focus, and why?
In addition to the youngsters that need access to it, other people who won't get the message in that age range need to get it. So third world countries that currently can't get to it.
So we've got a lot of disparity in the distribution of knowledge, understanding, capability, and if we could create an access that leveled that playing field, that could make a big difference, not just for one society at a time, but more of a grander society. That makes sense. One more. Anybody else have a thought about where they would start, where they would leverage from?
I will start maybe from education. That's kind of a...
And any particular part of education or topic? Focus?
Yeah, just like something like a global, for the young kids, read about formally this global view, and but I think across the board, I need to promote this, appreciate this diversity and multicultural environment and a global view, and yeah.
When you move around the states, it becomes very quickly clear how many people in most of the U.S. have never left the United States, right? They've not left it mentally or physically, right? They've rarely read books about it, and if they watch it as a culture story, what they're watching usually is a war between two worlds. So your thought would be, coming to appreciate and understand could make a big difference. When I was working, I got to work with Colgate-Palmolive in South Africa, just the 2 years before the elections and the 2 years afterwards. Oh my God, you cannot imagine a time like that where a whole new, the turn of history is happening. And one of the things that I thought while I was there is I wanted to pick up every black African in the United States that was under 16 years old and have them come watch this happen, to see the power, to see the transition, to see what could happen. I couldn't figure out how to fund it, but actually I should have also taken all the white kids now that I say that, because they're the ones that should have seen the power that was happening too. So I think these are three great places to start. So education, people, access to knowledge, and a connection with diversity. So listen just a bit as I talk then to these stories from what you would do, and even if you didn't tell us what yours is, or if you want to, you're perfectly fine stealing someone else's idea if it feels right for you too. Let's look just a little bit at why I think entrepreneurs are what are necessary to do this. And for me, the word entrepreneur has nothing to do necessarily with going out and starting a business. It has to do with a way of seeing the world, a way of engaging the world. And it can happen in parenting, it can happen in a not-for-profit, it can happen in your own standalone business, or it can happen as a leader using someone else's platform like Google. So I'm going to give you three ways that I think about and see entrepreneurs operating, which is the foundation, again, of this book. This isn't in the book, but it's a bit about why I wrote the book. One of the things that I think is a characteristic that's core to entrepreneurship, or thinking of the world entrepreneurially, is that the person that's doing that has a lot of personal agency. You know what I mean by that? Nothing stops them. Needs doing, I'm the one that's in there. I come up with the ideas and I move the ideas. I get knocked down, I bounce right back up. There is a strong sense of internal locus of control. I'm not a victim. So that's one of the things I see in entrepreneurs is this strength of personal agency. The second thing that I see is that they're always about making a difference. They're not very interested in just doing kind of better something somebody else has done. They actually want to break the mold. They want to do something that could really matter to as many people as possible. I love the 10X that Larry talks about. But every possibility we have, we can make a difference. And entrepreneurs think that way. The third thing here is something that people rarely talk about, but I think it's really important, which is bringing your uniqueness into it, your unique essence. So each of you are different than any other person in this room or any other person on the planet. And I'm not just talking about physically, I'm talking about kind of at a being level, who you are. When you were a child, people would look at you and they'd say, well, I think he or she's going to be a piano player. I'm looking at my 3.5-year-old granddaughter right now, and she just got her costume for Halloween, and she is a knight in shining armor. That's what she picked. 3.5-year-old girl. And we have pictures of her standing with a sword, and she says, I'm off to save the world. So it just makes me wonder, what is Sylvia going to be, right? And each of us had that version of us. And then the next time most of us hear about it, well, actually, you won't hear it, but it would be at your funeral. And people talk about how you were, who you were, why you were different in the world, but that's in us all along, and often it gets lost. And especially when you're in a great business, you can be swept into other people's work. And so what I believe is entrepreneurial is bringing back who you are and making sure that you are embedding who you are in the work. There is a new thing called social entrepreneurs. You probably heard or read about social entrepreneurs, right? Whole passel of folks who find causes and issues and then they form a business around them. And they add one thing. They tend to lose one thing that my base entrepreneur doesn't have, but they add this thing that my grandmother called external considering. You might have guessed already, I didn't mind people very well, and I didn't stay inside the boundaries that I was given, and I was in trouble a lot. And my grandmother's primary question to me always was, didn't you consider anybody else besides yourself? No, not at that age when she was asking me that. But as I've grown up, I now know that what I want to do is consider, and when I wrote the book, The Responsible Business, about the stakeholders, what I was trying to do is introduce this combination of external considering, like what is the life of your customer or user like? And of course, how many of you read the new How Google Works that's out? I bought it the minute I saw it. I had read it by the time I landed in Denmark 2 weeks ago. You have to read it. You'll remember why you're here. It's just amazing. But of course, the message that is threaded all the way through it is stand in the user's shoes. And that's exactly how you all think. I think that's one of the reasons Mikhail got so excited about my book, is that I was giving ways to go be in the life of the people that you were serving and then connect all the co-creators. And the co-creators for me are everyone who serves the customer or user. And that means the suppliers you hire, the contractors you hire, people who are called employees, which is a really weird word, but all of those kind of people, and that they do it in a way that Earth is served and made healthier, and that communities grow and remain unique, and the investors who count on us for an enduring return get taken care of. So all of that to me is external considering. And it actually has to happen in sequence, but that's in the last book, and we're actually not going to talk about that today. But if you get interested, you can go find it. So that's one of the first things the social entrepreneur does. They tend to be, however, instead of driven by making a big difference, they tend to be driven by issues of where something is broken. So they find something that's not working well, or a problem that needs to be solved. And so like stoves in South Africa, fires, cutting down trees, what they'll do is create a small little stove that people could use that doesn't pollute and doesn't cut down trees. Of course, it doesn't stop what caused us having that problem. So that's why I say it's like issue-based. It's not really working on the whole system, which you'll see in the next one. The other thing that happens for the social entrepreneur is they lose their unique essence expression most of the time. And they become dedicated to something else they want to change. The sad part of that is that then they get burnout, because if you're not in it, you don't get fueled back. You don't get nurtured back. So I want us to go to this third level, and what this book was about was creating what I call the responsible entrepreneur, which is different than social entrepreneur, because they're true businesses. The social entrepreneurs are often businesses that are operating like not-for-profits. They could have been a not-for-profit, but they're not supposed to do that now. They're supposed to make a business. The responsible entrepreneur is a deep and abiding business person. And they are creating a business because they believe that there are forms of capitalism which can make society work better. And it's a part of entrepreneurship. So they have personal agency. As you can see, all three of these folks have personal agency. But there's one thing that I introduce into businesses, and it was real easy to do in South Africa because of the transition, which is something called promises beyond ableness. Now, in Google audiences, you can guess what that means very quickly. Most people say, what? What do you mean, promises beyond ableness? It means seeing something you think could be done, but you don't know how to do it, but you're willing to promise to figure out how to do it, and you're willing to put it in writing, you're willing to commit to it, you're willing to fight for the resources to do it, you're willing to have performance tied against it, and you're willing to grow yourself in order to get there. So I put those into all companies that I work with. Everybody, I don't care whether you are an engineer or whether you are a person who is keeping an operation clean, whatever your role is, how is it you find your promise beyond ableness? Because to me, that's core to you getting to live your fullest life and make a big difference. The external considering then comes in that form. But there's one other thing, besides that the unique essence expression stays there, which is this idea of whole systems change. So, I talked about how a social entrepreneur works on an issue. What the responsible entrepreneur works on is the system that caused the issue. So they aren't problem solvers, they're game changers of systems. So they may change judicial systems. So one of the things that the Google Innovation Food Lab is doing, Lab for Food Experience, is that they are working on actually changing everyone on the planet's relationship to food. Everyone. Right? Soil, nutrition, its effect on climate. Well, speak of a promise beyond ableness, right, is huge. But it also is working on the system in every case, how it is that we grow food, how it is we make choices about food. And so the movement of the whole system is what this entrepreneur is about. So this book is full of 15 stories of people who go after the whole system, make promises beyond ableness, bring their uniqueness and distinctiveness to it, and make something amazing happening. Does that sound interesting? You're going to love reading these stories. I'm glad. I hope you all read the book in addition to just taking it. And most people tell me they're reading all the way through it, which is very exciting. So I want to tell you a story about how I came to the term archetypes. I am 1/16 Mohawk. I know I don't look like it. Whatever the bone structure and stuff that I could have had didn't get here, right? But the stories from my grandfather, of my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a part of the Trail of Tears that went across the southern U.S. You're all too young. Do any of you know about the Trail of Tears? You know about it. So it was when they moved Native Americans, Indians, off of their natural living places and tried to move them all into reservations, mostly in Oklahoma and New Mexico. A little bit in Texas, but all those are gone now. And 90% of the people who were moved died. So it wasn't a real well-planned, well-executed, and maybe nobody cared. But my great-great-great-grandfather was one of those folks. And he was responsible, as the chief of the tribe, became chief along the way, of regenerating a tribe and regenerating a nation. And what they used were 4 archetypes, which are necessary for anything to be reborn. And again, you can see this in any team you're in, and I've created modern versions of these, but here's what the terms were that my grandfather used. So the warrior is not the one who fights. He said, they are the ones who ask, what's worth fighting for? And the clown is not the one who just entertains and is the stand-up comic, but they teach us something. They point out the elephant in the room, and they do it with humor so that we can be uncomfortable but we can feel it. We've extracted that out of most of our things and put it on a stage, in improv theater or a stand-up comedian. The hunter is not the person who just hunts, but makes sure that everything stays healthy, the soil is healthy, the people are healthy for next generations. And the headman or headwoman is the one who asks, how should we think about this so we could get better answers than we got last time? That's what my grandfather taught me. And I've been introducing that into businesses all these years and tried to bring an understanding that it is not one of these that you are, but you have to use all of them. So if you were going to go out and you wanted to take on a promise beyond ableness, you probably will have to use all 4 over time. You'll have to ask, What's worth fighting for? Where's the elephant in the room? How do we nourish everything, and how are we going to think about it so we get better answers than we did last time? And if you don't feel like you can don that mantle and play all of them, then you got to go get some friends. My grandfather apparently rounded up a bunch of other folks, and they rebuilt a nation, and I got to be a part of that lineage. You'll notice when you, if you do, go look at the dedication, it's to my grandfather, and to my grandson, who is named after him, and to my mother, who recorded all those stories and kept them and passed them along, and to Sylvia, the knight in shining armor, who is part Maya and part Mexican. So she has a tribal heritage too. So that's what's behind this book. I want to differentiate one thing here, though, because archetypes are, I mentioned, there's too many words on that. Just let me tell you, ignore that. There's too many words on that. What I'm trying to differentiate here is the difference between an archetype and your essence. You are not an archetype, never will be. I do have a quiz if you want to for fun. You can go to my website at carolsanford.com, and you can take it and it'll say, here's what you default to all the time. You tend to always be a warrior, or you tend to always step into hunter role and are worried about the nourishment and keeping everything going. But the idea is that you want to learn to use all of them, but in every case you will do it your way. Essence is you, as I said earlier. You will never be anyone else. So the archetypes are like a patterned response, and the essence is who you are, and no one can ever take that away from you. Either that or you're gone. So the thing that I would like to share with you, and then I want to go back interacting with you a little bit, I want you to think about the example that you came up with that you said we should work on. Education, information, and access to it, and understanding and valuing the diversity. And ask which of these arenas, because they can help you know which archetype to use, which of these would you have to work on? Now maybe all of them, and I do have one story in the book of a woman who worked on all four, but you will tend to need to move one of these, maybe two. So everybody get back in your mind something you think you would work on if you were really going to improve society and ecosystems. What I found in working with my clients in the research that I've done is that those archetypes now work on four major arenas they change. So the question is going to be, which of these would you take on? The first is changing an industry. I have stories in the book, and by the way, 60% of the stories are women, some women of color, and 40% are men. Because I find that they're kind of imbalanced, which most books get written. And actually, I use 4 icons at the beginning, of which Larry Page is one. And it has been the most reprinted. More people have asked to reprint that story than any other. Number 2 is the Costco story, which they keep reprinting everywhere. So you'll enjoy the Larry Page story, because there are pieces there that I had to dig like crazy to get. And I love that I have actually Google-approved stories in this book. It's hard to get, right? So industry is the first one, and that's what the warrior does. They work on changing industries. The clown works on changing social systems. So what I mean by a social system would be something like, well, anything that we as a society structure to help us work together, like the tax system. Anybody think it could be improved? Do you have a feeling it might improve democracy or equality or any other things if we worked on the tax system? Anybody think, yeah, I think that might? Well, I have one person, the story is not in this book, but we had a conversation and I said, what if the essence of the IRS was actually to improve wealth in the nation? What if just everybody becoming wealthier? What if that were its purpose, would it be run differently? And would we have enough taxes? Would we have enough money? So I have somebody who is not far enough along for me to write their story yet, but they're really working on that social system and redefining, reimagining what it's about. The next one is to be able to change cultural paradigms. Now I think this is part of, I don't know, what's your name? Kami Frat? I think that what you're talking about, how we culturally get locked into our individual views of a cultural group or a cultural paradigm or a cultural way of working, and then each of us have our own narrow little box about that. The challenge of this particular archetype is to actually change what people believe. And there have been so many books out recently saying you cannot change what people believe. Well, I know that's not true, Because I actually literally used to believe that I could tell someone's race by taking a blood test because my father taught me that. And it formed an entire culture around how I saw the world. But it is possible to change belief by engaging, by information, by engagement particularly with information, right? The information alone didn't do it, but coming to know people, be with people, live in a world where you're more engaged, changed a cultural paradigm for me. And I have 2 stories in the book about people who are doing that, one of which is Michael Bacher. Mikel, I can't say his name. Can you say that? Michiel, right? Anybody else say that? Yeah? Do y'all call him that, or do you just call him Michael? Michael. Just easier, right? But I try to, and then I mess it up all the time, but I feel like I had good intentions, right? On the 4th one here, the paradigm of the headman is working, or head woman is working on governing agreements. And again, I have the story of Google and Larry Page here as just setting the tone at the beginning of the book about how it is you can go public and actually improve democracy and capitalism. Do you tell that story when you hire people or interview people? It's a phenomenal story about how you decide to go public, right? Only 16 companies had actually done the Dutch auction in the US that Google did before Google did it. Now that number is about that number every year, but people are still afraid of it. They don't understand how it could work. So what happened is that you take an agreement, which we already have. Larry didn't say, let's change all the laws and the rules. He said, let's use what we've got, and let's make it all change. Same thing happened with the broadband, with the analog, when Google bid on something in order to, I'm told that the reason we can keep our phone numbers is because of what Google did with the SEC. And that story is in the book. So you take the governing agreements that already exist, because it's really hard to change government, even through voting, right? We vote and we think, didn't we vote for different people who would work on different stuff? And we don't always get them. So you have to learn to work the governing agreements. So this book has stories of people who are doing that. So let me tell you just, I gave new names to these. And so instead of warrior, clown, hunter, headman, I said, what are they working on? And it turns out what the warrior is working on is really this seeing reality in a way that we normally don't. And I've got a couple of stories there, but the one story I want to tell you is the Reconnection entrepreneur, Kip Baratov. Oh, Kip is quite an amazing young man, and he decided that the social system he wanted to change was how economic development happened along the coast of Oregon where he lives. The fishermen were going out of business left and right who were there. All of the people that supported them were going out of business. They were creating social systems to give them money to try and retrain them. Let's let you be something else besides a fisherman. Let's you be something else besides a company that can. So let's just move all of you out of that and change it. And he said, but that is a way to live. And on the coast, it's really important. He created a cooperative. It's not a legal cooperative, but he brought together the boat, the captain that fishes, the fisher people who are on the boat. In fact, the company is called Fish People. The people who can and process, those who distribute, and those who sell it, like Costco, into an ongoing group that meets together every other week to look at the whole system. When you go to Costco, you can actually learn what they're doing with any specific piece of fish. Any of you shop at Costco ever? Yeah, so take your phone, look for Fish People's package. You'll see a QR code on it. It'll tell you who the captain of the boat was that caught that. It'll tell you who it was that canned it. It'll tell you how it was processed. It'll even tell you what the mercury and any other metals content is in that piece of fish you're about to buy. It has created chaos in Costco because everybody wants to know, why is nobody else doing what's happening here? And it's rebuilding the entire economic development structure around the fishing industry rather than trying to solve the problem, which was retraining them, giving them money to get them through, and they're figuring out how to do sustainable fishing. I don't think we have Google buying from them yet, but it just occurred to me we should talk about them. Yeah, and I actually was thinking when we were in Austin that I was going to have Michael talking to him, and that didn't work. So you and I will have that conversation. So isn't that an interesting story? Now, this guy got this idea while he was living in a yurt in the middle of winter in Yellowstone for 9 months to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. because he had been a Goldman Sachs very successful analyst. And he said, I don't have enough meaning. I still need to make money, but I need to make meaning also. And he said, I think I'm going to go find out how to do economic development. There's a long story between it, and I tell you a little bit of it in the book. But that's the kind of stories I'm talking about in this book. And then Michael, you know, he was sitting in Starwood before he came here. And the stories that I was really touched by when I met Michael were how much he saw intelligence in things that most people saw as a problem. In people, one of the things that you may know this story, that when he was in Starwood, many of the people were coming up from the Middle East, and he also had responsibility for the Middle East and Europe for Starwood Resorts for food. Many of those people who were coming up obviously did not speak the language in the European Union very well, wherever they were. Other people thought they were stupid. Michael said, no, language has nothing to, speaking another language has nothing to do with intelligence. Give people work to do, find ways to put translators, and he rebuilt the entire service system for Starwood based on using language as a leverage and giving people the ability to learn the language. So he actually started thinking about that kind of global shift before he got here. He's an amazing human being, and there's more of his stories and even of his childhood in this book. So what I would like to do is ask a few of you who had, and maybe the same three who volunteered, if you're willing, to ask which industry or which arena do you think you might want to affect if you were going to work on the diversity? Are you thinking you would, because like if you change an industry, you have to go work on getting the best product, everybody sees you out in front as the lead, and then you have to use that platform. And if it's a social system, you got to figure out how to intervene like Kip did in a way that goes and works on a system, not just a piece of something. And the education system is deeply in need of somebody figuring out how to intervene in the education system. How would you, Brian, intervene? Do you know how you'd intervene for the access? I'm going to go back so you can see what those things are.
It's interesting, it was similar to your Costco story where I had a meeting with manufacturers maybe 5 or 6 years ago and asked them if they saw a pipeline directly into factories, particularly in China, where they could see what was being manufactured and at least peg it to a link to the person that did.
Wow. Yeah.
They laughed at me because we're not anywhere close to that point.
Yeah.
But it sounds like other industries are. So
well, other persons are, industries are not. But, I think there is an opportunity. I don't know how you'd play it out, but I love that you could see. You could actually help shift an industry just by talking. And I think Google does that generally. So that's very good. Do you have any thoughts about how you'd intervene in the education system to work with young people? What would you do? How would you upend that industry? Because it is an industry, right? It's like producing widgets. Get the kids out, give them a test, no child left behind, but all of them are left behind. Yeah. Do you think about it off and on, though? When I ask you, what would you work on? That was one of the thoughts you had, right? Does anybody else think about how would you work on education? Anybody know? Where would you intervene if you were going to be a responsible entrepreneur and you were going to intervene and save us from what we're doing with education?
Jamie Oliver is probably a good example of how he's tried tackling it, right? Impacting the school systems and trying to take that route to make inroads, which seems from the outside looking in the easiest way to do it, probably.
And what do you think is the essence of what Jamie's doing? What is it because he is being very powerful along with Louise, right, helping him make that happen. What is he doing? He's disrupting, yeah. He's making things also very concrete and practical, isn't he? So kids learn while cooking, and adults, families learn. So I think there is a piece of information tied to practice that he does. So that would stay with what you're doing. What else do you see? Okay. What else do you see? How would you work? What would you work on if you were working on improving diversity? Because we're doing a terrible job of that in the U.S. overall.
Yeah. It's maybe organize those kind of different group, some exchange program, and also through
for all schools, all children.
Yeah, kind of even with technology advance, you can use this virtual system, right? The internet with this hangout thing also. I'm thinking just like an example here, like US and China or India, you don't need to be in the same, physical location. But that can be formulated some system, system school program, kind of every way have those kind of.
So the exposure and the connection where people begin to feel real is one of the ways we can move that. That's how that cultural paradigm is going to move. I did something very interesting in South Africa because one of the constitutional mandates was that the leadership of the business, top management, had to reflect the population, which was 97% black Africans. And guess what the top management of Colgate looked like when we got there? Of course, it was 97% white Africans. But what we said to them is no one is going to lose a job. What we want to do is be able to have you become resources, and we want to be able to meet that mandate in 6 months. We only lost one person who didn't want to play because Stelio Sesos, the leader of it, said, I want to build a great country while we build a great company. We did one other thing, which is we looked to ask each person about their essence, what they were attracted to working on. And instead of trying to do diversity programs, because we had 8 tribes in here, and believe it or not, there was as much warring between 8 black African tribes as there was here. But having each person look at essence got us, instead of looking at classes or races of people, looking at each person uniquely. All right, so we're running out of time. I am going to ask if you have anything you want to ask me. I've been asking you questions, and I'm willing to answer 1 or 2 if you have something you think I could help you with. And by the way, I'm happy to talk beyond this. If you guys take on these things you just talk about, I would love to talk with you to support you doing it. Is there anything people want to ask me?
Obviously, after some of the work that you've been doing with the food team, because I think there's so much great stuff to share, and it's tough to do within a 45-minute slot. But what's been some of the most exciting things that you've had the opportunity to partner with Michael and the food team on some of the game-changing things? And I think it goes back to the Innovation Lab. So what are some of the exciting projects that you've been thinking about?
Well, of course, the one I'm closest to is the community of practice that's related to ecosystems. And with Pie Ranch and the other ranches which are becoming involved. But what I really love about that is the mix of views. So we have people who are looking at farm to table, farm to family, I guess it is. We have people who are looking at farm to table, which is inside into Google. But the fun part is many of those groups have now created or it's fun for me, I think it's fun for them, have created a person in a role like Bon Appetit who is calling themselves the responsible business coordinator. So they're making sure that people are asking the questions, do we keep the user in mind? Are we really paying attention to keeping everybody who works here connected to it and feeling like their own uniqueness can be brought to it? And some of you, I'm sure, are being affected by that. Obviously, Google is so paying attention to regenerating Earth. And by the way, sustainability isn't even close enough for me. If you read my other book, I trash sustainability, sorry. Because it's all about doing less bad, and it's not really about, Earth has an agreement, and she would love for us every time we took resources to improve her health and vitality, right? Not just do a little less harm. So that, and we of course have Google Maps who are involved in that, so we're actually able to begin to see how that's influencing where we are. We've moved it, we went to Stockholm and connected with people from all over the world to show them what Google was doing. Information being spread. We had people from Asia as well as all over Africa. I don't think we had any South Americans there. Watching that's very exciting. I do also enjoy the people who are looking at the eating environment and how that influences the choices we made and how do we improve people's choice. So I know there's so many good things going on in that lab, and I don't know whether that's how all innovation labs turn out for Google, but that one I think is going to make a profound difference, really profound difference. Anything I should add to that? I'm so immersed in it now. I've kind of
trying to get your perspective.
Yeah.
The lab's only been happening for a few years.
Yeah.
It's getting some great momentum.
Are you hearing about it? Are you hearing about the lab, the innovation lab? No? Okay, well, there's a little bit about it in the new book, so you can read some of that, and I think we're ramping up some more stories. All right, so I feel like I should say thank you to all of you for coming. I think you will love this book, not just because I wrote it, because you should know the way I write books is I dictate them, and I have brilliant people who then make it shorter sentences and all that kind of stuff. But the people in this book are amazing, including Michael Bacher. So thank you all for coming. And if you'd like for me to sign your book, please stay, and I'm happy to do that for another 15 minutes or so.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.